Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the session that I have been looking forward to above all others here at the conference. This session that explores the user experience and makes us think from outside the world of opera what other companies and sectors are doing to respond to the needs of the user. As we reflect on practices in opera, we still sell tickets or ask people to pick up tickets at will call lines and other kinds of reserved desks. Our performances take place at the hours we set, the days we set, and the venue we set. All of this in a world of mass customization, of tailor-made, user-guided products and services. So as the world wraps itself around the user, how do we, as an opera company tied to an opera house, how do we respond to the sensibilities of this audience? We have wonderful speakers from different sectors, all of them from outside the world of opera, who are here to share what's going on in their businesses so that we have a chance to make creative connections between their expertise and ideas that might change the way we do business in opera. We get to sit back, listen to some short, dynamic presentations, after each of which I will come up and ask a couple of questions of our guest speakers, and you get to just take it in and think about how you might apply some of the ideas to your work at your opera companies. So without further ado, I am delighted to introduce our first speaker, James Buckhouse, oversees creation, production, and strategy and design of growth projects at Twitter. He's a founder of teamclassical.com and Bachtoberfest.org. His personal passion is to bring the arts to a new chamber, finding ways to blend the audiences and practices of chamber opera, installation art, dance, and digital media while borrowing techniques from the tech industry. So please welcome James Buckhouse.
All right. Hello, you know, I'm sitting over there. We have a little hiding place for the speakers over there. If you want a sneak peek, we're all over there. And on my seat was the sign reserved. And I got to tell you, they think this is wrong because I am certainly not reserved, and you're going to find that out in a second. I'm really, really excited to be here. Why? I've been worried, like you, for 9 months. There's a weight on my skull. What is it? If you're trying to make a go of it in the performing arts, you undoubtedly think it is this: cold cash money. Is that what you're worried about? It might be. Are you going to survive? It might be your problem, but what I really think, the thing you really need to worry about is this. This, right here, can you see it? These are people who have heard of opera, and these are people who love it with a passion and experience it every day. And notice this amazing yawning gap between the two, right? Terrifying gap, and you can do things through your heroic marketing efforts to, like Atlas, nudge those things closer together. And you can do unspeakably clever things where you draw little bridges across. But imagine if you're standing on that bridge. Look down, it is terrifying. Terrifying, people. What we need to do is this. We need to find a way to go from that first moment you even are aware of opera to delight in one step. In one step. Okay. Why am I here? God, I think together, let's do it. Let's build a better art world. How are we going to do that? I think we can do it with these 4 areas. First of all, you've got to make transcendent art. Second of all, we've got to find a way to share across our audiences. And learn from other industries, hopefully a little bit. That's what we're doing here today. And finally, we've got to get smart about evergreen revenue, right? Evergreen revenue. Let's start with transcendent art. So I was just introduced as coming from Twitter. I understand that. I have a job at Twitter. That makes sense. That's why you'd talk about me as coming from Twitter. But weirdly, I'm not trained as a techie at all. Trained as an artist. I have a fine art career, been in the Whitney Biennial, the Guggenheim, the Dia, ICA in London, a bunch of stuff, a bunch of museums. It's weird, I know, Twitter hired an artist. It's strange, but bear with me, it'll all make sense in a bit. You know, and I would do all these projects, digital animation projects. It was really quite fun. Exhibits all over the world. And then one day I started realizing the mark making I was doing was similar to the work that I loved from dance. And I was paying the bills working here at DreamWorks, made all the Shrek movies, the Madagascar movies, a few others. Here are some of the films I worked on. And I thought, oh my God, this could work if we just started to blend the arts and the performing arts to a single thing. I started bringing the idea of video and installation art to the ballet, video projected sets in the ballet, animation to the ballet. For me, that's when it started to all click. And in fact, I'm still working on that right now. This is my current project, is the installation aria, which is video projection as sculpture. So instead of bringing art to the performing arts, let's bring the performing arts to the art world and imagine a different chamber for chamber opera that could be the art museum, could be the art gallery. And what could you get? You get all kinds of amazing things when you start to realize that we don't experience opera as a single art form. We experience all the art forms by means of opera. Secondly, how can we share across audios? Can we say hello and thank you to San Francisco Opera for having the courage to do this? God, I love this. So good. And it works. Not only is it delightful to be there and see the families who aren't afraid to bring their children, who are, crying in the audience because it's an okay place to cry. Everyone's crying. I'm crying. La Traviata gets me. Oh my God, the bloody handkerchief. What could it be? The cough, the little cough. But it's also an introduction that meets people where they are, right? We've got to meet people where they are. And it's not, when I say share across audiences, it's not just going out and getting the baseball lovers of the world, but we've got to share across our own audiences. As people trying to make a go of it in opera, we cannot fight against the symphony. We cannot fight against the ballet. Those are our friends. Let's find a way to work together and share those audiences. This is Team Classical. It's a website and a Twitter community. We have 16,000 practitioners of classical music all there together, talking to each other, trying to make great things happen. Not in competition with each other, but to support each other. We've got to do that. We've got to support each other. All right, so yes, I do work at Twitter. This is one of the sites I run there. This is stories.twitter.com. Ordinary person against extraordinary odds. Achieve something remarkable by means of the platform. I want to show you one small crossover video. It's not opera.
I haven't had Twitter on my phone for a while, so I haven't been checking it much. But for whatever reason, I got home, checked it. I obviously follow Kevin Durant, he's one of my favorite players. He had just tweeted like a minute ago, and it said something like, "I'm really bored. Is anybody playing flag football in OKC tonight? I'm trying to run around." And so I retweeted real quick. I said, "I've got a game up in Stillwater. I need a deep threat." About 5 minutes later, my phone vibrates. He goes, "Can I play?" Question mark. And so I said, well, I retweeted that, and I said, "Can you catch?" And he said, "You for real?" And then he direct messaged me. He asked for my number, gave him my number. We direct messaged for a little bit. He said, "I'm going to call you in a little bit." Yeah, I mean, when his car pulled up at my house, I was just like, this is really happening. Like, my friends didn't believe me. I told a few people, but obviously you could tell, it got around pretty quick out here. So he's just the nicest guy ever. I don't know what to say. When are you going to have the best basketball player in the world going to come up here and hang out with Stillwater kids? It says a lot about Oklahoma City. It says a lot about Kevin Durant, and we love him here. It's probably the coolest moment of my life, definitely, at this point. So, yeah, it was a blast. Yeah, I'm pretty happy right now. Pretty stoked.
All right, now for the transformation shot. Here we are. All your flag football dreams coming true. And touchdown. All right, that is so fun. That is so good. If that had not happened in real life, I would have pretended it was real and have made this myself, right? I would have hired those kids and shot this because it's gorgeous, right? I didn't, though. We woke up to the news and found that this had happened. It didn't quite happen as elegantly as this. The kids in Stillwater had shot their own video, and it was okay. It had all this footage in it. I called them. I said, "Hi, it's James from Twitter. Can I recut your video?" And I did it to make a story that made sense, right? Because the story has to make sense and flow through in a way where you can be pulled along on the adventure and delivered in a way where you're transformed, right? Where you're transformed. So it's not enough to have great events happen in the world. It's not enough to have amazing things go down by means of your brand. You've got to also find a way to tell that story in a way that it can be digested, enjoyed, and repeated. Why? Who remembers this from math class? This is a function machine. Numbers go in the top, and they come out the bottom. 2, 4, and 5 go in. 4, 16, and 25 goes out. So what's this function do? Who's good at math here? It squares a number, right? It squares a number. The same thing with the stories and the marketing material and the events that you create for the opera. The same thing. They're this little function, this little machine where stuff goes into it and something else comes out, right? Something else comes out. And what comes out the other end? Story. A story that's to be repeated, right? So I'm working on Madagascar 1, and in it we have this mad lemur king. He's played by Sacha Baron Cohen, which you may know from such films as Borat, right? And here he is in our children's cartoon, right? We're there, and I know, what were we thinking, right? He's pretty funny. We're doing the I like to move it scene. If any of you have children or grandchildren, you've heard this song, you know, it's I like to move it. We're doing that scene. We're like, hey, could you, like, you know, dance a little bit? We'll videotape it, give some inspiration for the animators. He's like, sure. He starts to dance, starts doing this thing, and it turns into, now this is being live streamed, so I don't even really know what to say, but imagine charades for adults. Imagine animals and people falling down like Salome, but, you know, bodies and Tetris, and we were rolling with laughter, right? This is outrageous sexual humor that has no place in a children's film. And it was really funny, and a lot of that made it into the film. In fact, we were in a screening of the film is down in the suburb of LA. We're standing behind the old perforated style screens, and we're staring out through the background. We're check-marking jokes, right? The team's going through it all. And the parents are laughing so hard, they're just howling with laughter, right? Yes, it's sexually suggestive, but it's funny, right? They're just laughing and laughing and laughing. We're high-fiving, we're thinking we've got like, you know, we're gonna be millionaires, it's gonna be great. And you know, we have a primary joke, secondary joke, tertiary joke. They're laughing over the second and third jokes, which is good news for us because it means they're gonna get it on DVD or stream it, and they're gonna do it over and over and over to catch those second and third jokes because there's always something new, like we're so excited. We give an audience survey question at the end that says, would you recommend this movie to the parents of your children's friends? None parents would, right? Not a one, right? Not a one, because we promised family fun and entertainment. We had delivered sort of adult sex romp, like not, right? And so in this function machine, right, what goes in, we thought we might be optimizing for funniest jokes, right? And if we did that, we would have won, but we'd have all been fired and there would have been zero box office. What you have to actually optimize for, right, what you have to actually optimize for is the message that's going to be repeated. So what does this mean? It means that these stories, these projects that you work on, these are tiny machines that affect change in people's minds. And the most important thing, and this is straight up from the CMO of Coca-Cola, is will your audience find it share-worthy? And if they will, you should do it and they will share it. And if they won't, you should not. All right, let's learn across from industries. I'm going to show you one more really quick thing here from Twitter. This is terrifying news. I got to let you know that the average American over the age of 2, according to Nielsen, watches 40 hours of TV a week. 40 hours of TV a week. That's a full-time job. That's a full-time job, and I don't know about you. I'm not watching 40 hours. I'm not holding up my weight. Someone else has got to pick up my slack, right? And so I'm thinking, how can we reach people watching TV? So what did I do? I invented this. This is the Twitter mirror. Here it is.
Now, before the show, Riri posed for a few special photos with Roxy.
Should we take pictures right now? Okay. 1, 3, 2. What is that? Wait, we gotta do that one again. Damn it, Paul. All right, geez. All right, I love it. You look fabulous.
Now check this out. This is a mirror with a camera behind it. Rihanna, LL Cool J, right there.
Love his jacket.
And everyone else at the Grammys could stop by and take a picture, which we instantly tweeted out to the world.
So we put these backstage at the Grammys on all 3 entrances backstage, talked to everyone with a clipboard to make sure that hair, makeup stopped by the Twitter mirror. Every single celebrity did, and they had a ball, right? They had a ball. We then immediately called the Oscars with a jealousy campaign saying like, well, the Grammys did it, how many do you want? They wanted it too. And when we started doing this around the world at every major event, from sports, that's a lot of sports, to the ballet, and then all the way up to this year's Oscars where we included voting. And finally, evergreen revenue. Where is your audience? You think your audience has a butt and a seat in your theater for the nights that you're running the show? No, your audience is around the world. Your audience is craving your stuff. Your audience is online. I'm constantly sending help emails to the Met Opera, and if any Met Opera people are here, I'm so sorry, it's coming from me, saying you didn't charge me enough. It's only $14.95 per month for 200 operas and 300 operas on audio. Like, you need to charge me more, because here is your audience. The best idea of digital distribution is you can have evergreen content for your artists, your performing artists, who've worked so hard to put together a show. Let that show live on and on by means of digital media. Why? Because you've got people, not users, with hopes and dreams that you can help their fundamental human needs to feel nourished, to feel that moment of emotional tragedy and triumph, so we can realize opera's for everyone. Okay, thank you.
On back for a second. Can I ask you a question or two?
Of course.
That was fabulous. Thank you.
Oh, my
I think
pleasure.
you got more into that time. And our great friend Brandon Gride is down here holding up signs about how much time everyone has. So thank you for that. Our keynote speaker a couple of years ago, Doug McClellan, who hosts and edits Arts Journal, said that in his view, young people don't experience anything anymore unless it is shared. That sharing it is key to implanting the experience in the individual. I'm wondering whether you agree with that.
I certainly think they imagine the experience and how it might be optimized for sharing. I don't think it's true that they don't experience it without sharing, but I think they always consider how they might.
What makes something share-worthy?
What makes something share-worthy? Great question. So New York Times, right, had this really interesting question. They published this really interesting research that came out of the University of Pennsylvania saying, like, what are the most shared articles in the New York Times, right? And they had low expectations. They think it's going to be Britney Spears, like, stuff, right? Like pop culture stuff. No. There was weirdly over-indexed on, like, scientific papers. It was weirdly over-indexed in, like, really highbrow stuff. And they're like, what's going on? People share things that reflect positively back on them. I'm going to email you this article about, like, special science thing because it makes me look smart, right? Right? And so don't think that you can't package together amazing content that's going to make the person who shares it look great, because they will, because they want to look great. And guess what? They're going to transfer that positive brand equity back to you, the person that connected them.
You clearly are someone who likes opera and go to the opera in person. If there's something about the live performance experience that you would change, what would you do?
You should never have to choose between getting a glass of champagne and going to the bathroom. All of the volunteer ushers turn around and sell champagne. Why not? Simple solution, right? One price, $20. You get 2 glasses, no change, no other option. Move people through, get your glass of champagne, and enjoy it. The other thing is set up if you say no photos of the performance itself or whatever archaic rules that you have that you believe in, God bless you, go for it. But if you say that, give them something else to take a picture of, some beautiful bit of, like, some constructed secondary set in the front in the lobby they can stand in front of and photograph and share. Give them something to share.
This is fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Our next speaker is Paul Chasson. He's an urban designer, urban planner for the San Francisco Planning Commission. He manages the Living Innovation Zone program and has worked for more than a decade in positions related to the built environment in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, so my name is Paul Chasson. I work for the planning department for the city. On behalf of, I guess, all 30,000 or so of us in the bureaucracy, I'd like to welcome you to San Francisco, and thanks for having me. I'm going to talk about temporary urbanism, but before I kind of explain what that means, I'm just going to sort of trying to find, like, the problem statement that we're kind of trying to solve for, which is that in San Francisco, 25% of our streets are public rights-of-ways. That's the space between the buildings. And we've largely used them for storing and moving vehicles. And there's huge public health costs, there's economic costs, there's social costs to this. This is pretty typical. And despite 30 years of some of the most progressive policies in the country, the Better Streets policy and the Complete Streets policy and the Transit First policy and on, we just didn't have a lot to show for it. You know, on the ground, from the policy to execution, we ended up with a lot of spaces like that. And so our idea behind temporary was that if we do something kind of lighter and faster, we can sort of put down some paint, use low-cost materials. Instead of spending years of public process and years designing something in millions of dollars, we could do something in the tens of thousands of dollars range and hopefully shift public opinion, shift the discourse about what the potential for our streets could be in the city. And so we've done that a few ways. We started with plazas. These are places where the street grid comes together in a kind of unusual way and weird angle and creates some reclaimable space. And so we'll turn them into an open space. This was modeled on New York's program. They started with Broadway, is probably the most famous one in the country, and that's being converted to a more permanent space for those of you who've been there. We then moved on with plazas. Plazas were complicated. They're more kind of unique and big and complex. So we sort of invented parklets in San Francisco, building on some things I'll tell you about in a second. But these are spaces where we have a program where merchants or a similar entity can sort of apply for a permit to convert their on-street parking spaces that front their business into a miniature little mini park, a publicly accessible open space for everyone. To date, we've got 50 of these or so on the ground. We've got about another 30 to 50 in various stages of the permitting process. They've been hugely successful, and they're spreading around the country and the globe. So built on that, we're still continuing to experiment. This is photos from what we call the UP Festival, the Urban Prototyping Festival. It was like a 3-day event in an alley, and we're planning another one, a larger one, with like 50 exhibits that'll be up and down Market Street as a way to help the public think about how we might redesign Market Street, which is going through a redesign. It's like the city's main street. And these are bringing in a whole bunch of new characters and players into the process of placemaking. And then this new program that I manage is the Living Innovation Zone program. And so what we're trying to do here is, like where the UP Festival goes down in scale, this one sort of moves up from like a parklet to a bigger installation, from a $30,000 thing to a $150,000 thing. It's moving onto a sidewalk, which is a new space, which has a lot of technical details that come up with it that I won't get into. But and then also, what we're trying to do with this program is, we think of ourselves as the innovation capital of the world in San Francisco. We're the center of this kind of global wave of stuff that's happening that's changing the whole economy. And walking down our streets, you wouldn't know it. So we're trying to create some monuments to this place, this movement that's happening here in the public realm, and bringing together the innovative science thinking, arts, design, and technology, and partnering these different sort of organizations to build these larger things. So we have some program goals. These are the goals. They're about placemaking and transportation and increased business. But the main thing that we did, I think, that was really important is we sort of set these really high civic aspirations for the program. We said these have to be public spaces. If you have a parklet and I go to your competitor, I can eat the sandwich in the parklet and you can't ask me to leave. These are for everyone. And I think that that's had a huge impact in the way that this program's received and the way that we think about what public space is in San Francisco. So anyway, these spaces are really successful. Grad students are constantly emailing, wanting to write theses about them. They're being copied around the world. Like, what is it about these spaces that have so captured people's imaginations when we have all these other kinds of spaces that don't? What is it about temporary that is so exciting for people? One of the ways that I think about it, just as when I think about urban design, is that's kind of, we are in charge of the space between the buildings. We look at it like a neighborhood sort of scale, but we might look at streets and sidewalks and plazas and all the negative space in the city. And there's this kind of history of borrowing from the sciences, in the arts and humanities. So, one of the ideas that's really big right now in urban planning and landscape architecture is this idea of thinking of cities as an ecological system, borrowing these ideas from ecology. And so, as a designer, we think of cities as these self-organizing places that generate economic and cultural activity. That's the job of a city. And so as a designer, I take these spaces, and this process happens by human interactions, humans engaging with each other. And so these spaces can act as a little catalyst to bring about this sort of, let the city do what it wants to do. So here we have parklets bring in new sort of people into the process. We're getting neighborhoods and people to engage with each other and catalyzing just social interaction. And so over here, you can kind of see we're social animals. We want to watch. We create spaces for people to watch other people. This on the image on the bottom is from the Living Innovation Zone. It's by Powell Street BART. It's a singing bench, so people touch. There's metal panels on the armrest, and you hold hands. It completes the circuit, and the bench starts playing music. And what we see with this is like and this is a parabolic whisper dish. That there's another one 60 feet away. You can sort of talk in a normal voice, and people can hear you. And so people will do it, and they'll kind of sit in there, and then they'll kind of go like that. There's like this moment when they figure it out, and then they start experimenting, and then they start recruiting. They'll grab strangers and start teaching them how to do it. And so here on Mid-Market, where there's a lot of tension around the new tech moving in and displacing a lot of existing arts organizations, there's a real need for these sort of empathetic moments. So we're kind of using the activization to trick people into engaging with one another. So, and then finally, this is a parklet that went into a neighborhood that had all the ingredients except space, a place. It had a pizza place and a pub and a grocery store and a coffee shop. And the parklet went in, and it's just become this focal point for this neighborhood where neighbors are getting to know each other. And the business sponsors are so excited about these larger civic goals. It's not just about turning more crumpets for the women. She's like really excited about her role in like helping create this neighborhood. So we're pulling all these lay people out that aren't professional architects. This is an architectural drawing from a woman using Pilates studio software about her idea for a parklet. And this garage was a $30,000 permit to make a restaurant. That's the whole cost of a parklet. So we're bringing in all these people that aren't used to our process. There's a lot of hand-holding for us, but there's a lot of benefits that we get out of them too. I think something that maybe is interesting for opera is like these things started out as an act of civil disobedience. Some artists went in, put some sod down in a parking space and a bench and a little tree and said a sign that said "Feed the meter." They put a photo on the internet. It went viral, and that's like a subversive sort of act. And then the state sort of went and said, "Oh, okay, that's a good idea. We'll adopt it." You know, the meaning changes when you start with something that's against the law, and then you do it within the framework of government. There's like rules and regulations and a process now, but still, I think it's kind of subversive in a different way. It allows people to see government working and providing a tangible public benefit in a really highly visible, literal metaphor. And this is our healthy within government too. We had this initial goal of changing the culture outside of government, and what we're finding is that these things can actually change the culture within government itself. So this is from the ribbon cutting of that Living Innovation Zone I showed you, and this is me and the DPW permanent guy posing with a carving bust of Mayor Lee at the event. And so we have worked closely together across departments, and within government, people tend to get territorial, and now we were able to do these bigger and bigger projects together. A sort of concluding sort of thought for you. This is from one of my favorite bloggers. I'm assuming you guys don't read transit blogs. He writes this blog called Human Transit. And he was talking about how the Portland streetcar, which is also being copied around the country, appeals to these really different sensibilities that people have. It's both nostalgic. It harkens back to this glorified past that never really existed. And it's phallic. It looks fast, even though the thing crawls along at 6 miles an hour. I think similarly, some of this temporary stuff appeals in this sort of dialectic way to these opposing interests or sort of wants that we have, where they're subversive, they're rebellious, they're kind of edgy, but they're also utopian. They're about this collective, us all getting together and doing these feel-good projects to sort of improve the city. So to sort of conclude, I would say it's dangerous just taking ideas from one profession totally and putting them wholesale in another one. I think there are some themes that could be interesting for opera. One is this idea of just playing with scale and formality. Opera is like capital A art. The building itself is also a kind of a really formal, fancy building. I think you could put opera in a really grisly context or put grisly in an opera sort of space. I think you could also just by operas are complex and expensive, and you could do something with trying to use cheaper, lower risk investments or experiments that might have a lower risk if they fail. So just don't be afraid to fail. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. You used the word placemaking.
Yeah.
And that is clearly a buzzword in today's cultural civic environment. Can you just explain what placemaking means? Yeah, so placemaking is about creating memorable spaces that people love and cherish. A lot of, as cities have kind of grown, I had a slide that for time I didn't put in, but there was a slide of medieval Florence fitting into a freeway, the same space of a freeway interchange in Atlanta. We sprawled out, and we've created all sorts of new streetscapes that need to be activated. And at the same time, the way we work, we're just not walking around for work anymore. We are sitting at desks and at computers, so people aren't activating those spaces naturally. There's a huge need how to figure out how to make places that are loved and cared for by people. And you used the phrase, capital A art. Do you see a role for the traditional arts in some of this placemaking activity?
I do. I mean, I think there's a lot. I think people get excited about messing with the rules. And I think, I mean, what we're trying to do with the Living Innovation Zone program is providing a platform. So we're working, that first thing was built, I didn't say this, it was built by the Exploratorium, which is a science museum.
We're going
kind of
there
arts.
this evening.
So they built it, and we're working on a second one with them. We're in some early conversations with some similarly scaled cultural institutions within the city. And for artists, even though you might not get a lot of money in return, there's something like 7 million impressions just because of the pedestrian volumes we have on Market Street a day. I mean, a year on that thing, it's like 200,000 a day or something insane. And so you can get a ton of exposure for whatever you're trying to expose.
And how do you include the public in these placemaking projects? How's the public involved?
So with the Up Festival, for example, the public, I mean, we've created a platform and a framework that the public can sort of tap into. So parklets, for example, it depends on the scale. Like parklets, there's a process, a small business owner can get a little permit and design something and build it, and it's not that complex, and there's some relatively simple rules. And so that's something that they can sort of do for like 15 grand, which is achievable. With the Up Festival, we're trying to, it's small artists, even really giving people a chance to get their foot in the door and try something. And I mean, what we're seeing is that people are hugely excited about they really care about the places they live, and they actually want to participate in doing it. With the Up Festival, they might also get to vote on which projects they like, and so just try to find ways for them to.
So it is very grassroots at a certain level for the parklets, that the ideas come from people.
Yeah, they are funded. They're funded and designed and maintained by the private organizations, and yet they are, in exchange, providing a public open space.
I wonder what an opera parklet would be.
It would. I think that could be a wonderful idea. Well, we should talk about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Our next presenter is Laura Kuzumoto. She is the manager for Innovation Technology Services at Kaiser Permanente, and she is at the cutting edge of thinking about technology and its relationship to healthcare, focusing on avatars, virtual agents, gamification, and artificial intelligence, which I thought was a reference to tenors. But Laura, we're way into the conference. Give me a break. So, Laura, please, we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mark. So I am from the Innovation and Advanced Technology part of Kaiser Permanente. And in case you don't know, Kaiser Permanente is a healthcare provider as well as a health insurance plan that serves about 9.3 million members in several states, including California. And I'm in the innovation group, and I'm very fortunate to be able to apply my high-tech background and experience with startups in working in the higher purpose of healthcare and the mission of Kaiser Permanente. I'm also very lucky to be wearing a dress that lights up when I move, and hopefully by the time I finish talking, you'll be able to figure out why. So I'm trying to move the slide. Thank you. All right, so I think some of the techniques that we use for innovation could also be applied in other industries, including performing arts, for coming up with new ways of having the user's experience. We also have some challenges of wanting to move into a more consumer-oriented world, so innovation is constantly needed. 60 years ago, Kaiser Permanente was kind of a startup company. A young surgeon named Sidney Garfield came up with the idea that he could better finance his hospital if he took 5 cents per person for his payment in advance instead of fee for service. So 60 years ago, they started paying Kaiser Permanente that way, and ever since then, we've been innovating. Today, our techniques are based on a very strong innovation structure of design thinking, and we have a number of groups that work very hard to enable all of our employees to be innovators. So we work on lots of different techniques, including the first stage of design thinking is really to get into the shoes of the member or the employee or whoever's situation we want to improve and really understand how they see it. And we have a number of techniques of doing that, including talking to them, going to visit them, going where they are, or adopting personas, and then we will get some of them together and start doing a lot of ideation. Now that I am you, I'm going to start thinking about how I could use different solutions. And we'll talk about some other techniques as we go forward. Another technique we have is to create movies and other kinds of visualizations that show how we will use these innovations and how they will actually benefit the patient or the doctor or the nurse. And by doing that, we can inspire what the solution will be. And this is an example of one such movie that was put together by our Chief Innovation Officer. And I'd like to start the movie now. Oops. Okay, here it goes. So what this movie really is envisioning some technologies that exist today and some that don't exist yet. And it's blending them together into a vision of how people with different health issues are supported by our solutions. And it also embraces the idea of total health. It's not just, is this technology or solution supporting you when you are at the doctor's office, but it is also helping you stay healthy and preventing disease. So you see some examples here, for example, of activity sensors that maybe they're dresses that light up when you move, or maybe they are keeping track of your blood pressure or your cholesterol as you move through your daily life, and then they collect information and give that feedback to you that you may use for yourself, or you may even use in your own social media. Maybe you have a health club and you want to share with other people. Here's some examples where a doctor might be finding a way for this woman to get more exercise in her daily life, and he's able to tap into that information during their visit, and she then does incorporate it. So you see this is part fiction and part reality today, and this will guide our designers and technologists in their solutioning as they go forward. My group specifically focuses on looking at new technologies and trying to figure out how they can be used in healthcare and how they can benefit our members and also our workforce. And what you see here are a couple of our staff at the America's Cup last year. We were there, we had a pavilion, and we had a bunch of technologies. And these two are talking to some children, and they're saying, if you grow up to be a doctor someday, and you have this wearable glass, like a Google Glass, on your head, what do you think would be in there? If you could use it today for your health, or you could use it for your parents, what do you think that would be you'd be seeing there? So it's just kind of an imagination session, and that's another way to get great ideas from the mouths of babes. We also have at our disposal the largest innovation center for healthcare in the United States, named after Dr. Sidney Garfield. And the pictures you see here are of an exercise. Garfield Center is sort of like a movie set. It's in San Leandro, and there's a mocked-up operating room, there's a mocked-up emergency room, there's a clinic, a home environment where we can try out in a very safe environment some new techniques and new solutions. And if you think about it in healthcare, innovation, you can't just do it for innovation's sake. You have to be sure about the quality, that things are safe, that they actually improve people's health and not go in the other direction. So that's a very important part of our testing. So here's a safe place, and what you're seeing in these pictures are testing 4 different techniques for following a checklist in the operating room. When you're in an operation, obviously it's a high-performance environment, and several years ago, Atul Gawande wrote a book called The Checklist Manifesto, where he found that just keeping a simple checklist would help reduce the errors in the operating room. And we have implemented those already, but here we're testing some different techniques that might make. So we're testing it on an iPad, testing it on a big screen, testing it with a Google Glass that the surgeon is wearing. And we did a comparison test and found that actually a hybrid solution is probably going to be the best for the operating room. So once something is successful in a simulation at the Garfield Center, and we find that it's going to be compatible with our systems and it's going to be safe for our members, we might try it in a pilot program. That's kind of the next step in the innovation process. This picture is of a telemedicine kiosk that's currently installed in San Diego County. And what it is a totally enclosed booth and very private. And we have a medical assistant or nurse that brings the member in, and they're able to have a conversation with the doctor right there in that booth. You can see the picture of the doctor in the screen there, and there's telemedicine instruments for blood pressure and all the typical measurements they might take, an otoscope for the ear and so on. So they can have a 15-minute routine visit with their doctor right there at the place where they're employed. These are the San Diego County employees who are Kaiser Permanente members. So far the members really love this. It's very convenient and it's very great doctor visit. We're still assessing, is it going to be sustainable, affordable, and does it really deliver quality care? We're also working with the Tech Museum of Innovation as a way to outreach to the community. And this is a partnership. We do work with companies in other industries, and the Tech Museum is working on re-envisioning their relationship to their community by also using this design thinking approach. And currently they're iteratively designing a healthcare related exhibit that we are co-sponsoring, and that will be launched in the fall. And it's really interesting to see how they're experimenting with new technologies that measure brain waves and that measure heartbeats and things like that, and coming up with a way of humanizing all that data and helping people understand how they can use them to design a more healthy lifestyle. About 500,000 people go to that museum every year, so this will be a great way to communicate, especially with kids and their families, about total health. And today, there's going to be exhibits after these talks, and we're exhibiting there as well. So we're bringing Google Glass and the Oculus Rift virtual reality, activity sensors, and exactly one cool dress that we can talk about. So come join the conversation with us about technology and how we can use it in healthcare and perhaps in opera as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm fascinated by your process of innovating. Mm-hmm. So you spoke early on about the idea of really putting yourselves in the shoes of the
yes.
customer or the patient or the client.
Right.
What is the process that you encourage your employees to go through that helps them envision what their customers are going to experience?
There are a number of techniques for that. So one of them is video ethnography. We have ethnographers that go and study the patients and spend time with them or perhaps members who are at their homes and film a number of different members. That's one. There's also having these sort of personalities, and we develop these personality profiles, and then we can give that to the different employees so they understand those.
And that they essentially play act in your ideation sessions?
They can play act, exactly. So they can play act as those personalities, that's right. And understand it that way. So there's a number of different ways that we incorporate that.
So that you could imagine an opera company staff perhaps putting themselves in the shoes of someone coming to the theater
Absolutely.
Or renewing a subscription or getting a glass of champagne.
That's right.
So that people take on the persona of their customers to see what the experience might be like.
That's right. And another technique is bringing the real people into a simulated environment and kind of having a discussion about it in that simulated environment.
Do you use observation? Do you ever just anonymously observe customers in a real-life setting?
I don't think we do it anonymously,
Mm-hmm.
so we typically make sure that they know they're being observed.
Okay.
Yes.
Are you going to tell us why your dress is on?
What's that?
Are you going to tell us why your dress is blinking?
It encourages people to move. So the more I move, the more it lights up, and therefore, it's an activity. It's total health. Keeps you active. Right?
It's absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much, and we'll see you later on.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
you.
Just as a reminder, some years ago, it's probably 15 or more years ago, we hired a firm that observed opera attenders at 5 or 6 different opera companies. It's called Observing Opera Attendants, and it was fascinating to discover what opera companies were insensitive to in the customer experience. They went to Boston, and Boston Lyric Opera was a very, very snowy day. And Boston Lyric Opera had very carefully shoveled all of the snow from in front of their theater. But every adjoining storefront and business and building was piled with snow, and they hadn't thought beyond the front of their theater of how their patrons were going to get from the most popular parking garage to the theater. At New York City Opera, they discovered that the people who came earliest to the opera company were the senior citizens getting dropped off early, but within that lower lobby at State Theater, there was no place to sit and no access to a bathroom. And it was all completely observed and documented, and City Opera then began opening the gates and letting people up earlier so senior citizens coming could sit down and go to the bathroom. So observing the customers, stapling yourself to a customer and figuring out what they're doing can be a very informative experience. But now we're going to hear from Meyer Sound. John McMahon, who's the Executive Director for Operations and Digital Products, is here to talk to us about the way they imagine the user experience through sound design, making rooms, spaces that are not necessarily suited to opera sound good for opera. So, John?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be speaking with you today, and I'd like to thank Opera America for inviting me to do so. I'm John McMahon, and I'm part of Meyer Sound, where we are always thinking sound. We are today going to talk about the user experience and how the sonic environment transforms those experiences, or how we might reimagine sound from the perspective of the user. And those of us, we're all users of sound. We all consume sound, so I think it applies to all of us. So sound is a physical phenomenon, and the sound environment encapsulates everything you hear, not just the sounds that you want to hear. The environment doesn't typically get the level of planning and design as it deserves, and there are many contributing factors as to why this is. And I'll explore some of these today. For instance, our visual sense is better developed, and we better understand our experience of something through how it looks. It's also much easier to share and agree on visuals because they are static, where sound is transient. When I stop talking, my sound is gone. The fleeting nature of sound makes it really hard to discuss. When we try to visualize sound, such as in this image, it doesn't necessarily help us convey the experience of hearing that sound. We don't hear in stereo, we hear in surround. There are sounds all around us, helping us locate a fire truck, hearing a barking dog, or a baby crying, or even hearing these things without using our sight. So when we close our eyes, we automatically, immediately start to hear differently. Our brains divert resources to auditory centers and enhance our ability to hear. This is a remarkable phenomenon, and many of us prefer to listen to music with our eyes closed. At least we'd like to think that's the case when we look into the audience and see them with their eyes closed. But think for a moment, the opposite isn't true. If you plug your ears, your vision doesn't improve. The practice of architecture as an art form and technology has offered an amazing range of building practices never before imagined. But the practice is still primarily focused on visuals. How does the building look? Does it fit within the landscape? Are other factors such as the form, is it following function? How do residents move through the space? How can we conserve resources, and so on. But the design of the sonic environment in the home or office or city street or park as a whole concept often comes much later or not at all. As a result of overall lack of planning, we live our lives in a sonic environment of noise. This should come as no surprise, especially to us city dwellers. We hear the thrum of urban life, the constant hum of the freeway, our neighbors arguing next door, and we eavesdrop, whether we want to or not, on the conversations of our coworkers. These are the things we often don't want to hear, but if we had smarter design, we could eliminate them. We've become numb to the noise around us. We take for granted a sonic atmosphere that contributes to stress and unhappiness. Many of us have even lost the desire to seek silence. And young people, and I would say even most of us older folks, now listen almost exclusively to highly compressed music downloaded through iTunes. And we further compromise this very compressed music by listening with cheap drugstore earbuds. The saddest part is that the quality of the sound is the new normal for a whole generation of young people who've never heard music in any other way. In the business you are in, sound must be given top priority. Most of us consider hearing to be the most important of all our senses. The supremacy of sonic impressions over visual impressions is clearly demonstrated by the fact that the character of visual impressions will be determined by the character of the sounds which accompany them, and not vice versa, which is why many people feel that music is the highest of the art forms. Joshua Kushner of Arup, a global engineering firm at the forefront of acoustic design, argues that we need enlightenment. The good news is that there are many people who are thinking about sound and advocating change. This enlightenment doesn't only benefit our pleasure, but also our health and education. The noise from all the beeps and buzzes and alarms and machines certainly impacts the recovering patient's ability to sleep. Sleep is essential to recovery. This noise that distracts us, guess what? It also distracts our professionals. Do we want our pharmacists distracted? But there's also a shocking lack of attention to the sonic environment in the classroom. Little or no investment has been made in rectifying this. One of education's biggest issues at the moment is the huge increase in kids diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. And not being able to hear in the classroom can't be helping these kids. Creating an environment where everyone can hear is the first step in creating an environment where everyone can learn. It's amazing, but even within our own industry, there is a lack of appreciation of the importance of sound and the art of sound design. Although the Tony Awards recognize more than 24 categories of creativity in the theatrical arts, they just announced the elimination of the award of sound design. They're essentially saying, this is not important. Your experience of the sound in a musical theater production is not important. Needless to say, there's been a tremendous outcry, and an online petition has already garnered nearly 32,000 signatures. So I encourage everyone here to sign up too. One of the contributing factors that impedes the development of the sonic experience is that there's a confusing and contradictory lexicon describing sound. For example, at Meyer Sound, we often hear that using technology to create sound is not natural. But there is no natural acoustics unless you're in a cave or a hollow or a bowl. Once you add wood, fabric, or concrete or acoustic discs, that acoustic is no longer natural. And does this look natural? It's certainly a beautiful space, both visually and sonically, but is it natural? This is one of the world's finest concert halls, built using the technology of the day. So this is just one example of why we need to drive the adoption of a lingua franca so that we can collaborate on the design of sonic experiences with a common understanding. So, John Mayer's lifelong quest began in the 1960s at a Donovan concert. Believe it or not. He went to impress a girl, and that concert made a lasting impression. The sound was horrible, and John thought to himself, I can do better than that. And so he has. And he got the girl as well. That girl was Helen, who later became his wife and business partner. And John never met a sound problem that he didn't want to tackle. And we've tackled some challenging environments. We've done a lot of work in concert halls. Zellerbach in Berkeley was the first hall to install a constellation system. And Michael Tilson Thomas was so amazed at the technology that broadcast the sound from inside his new concert hall to outside in the New World Symphony Park that the San Francisco Symphony's newest venue, Soundbridge, is getting a constellation system right as we speak. How many times have you missed an announcement that's changing your gait when you're flying? Yeah. We're tackling that as well at Houston Intercontinental Airport with a distributed system of our intelligent DC products. And a combination of our gorgeous acoustic panels and a specially designed constellation system has been recently installed in a restaurant here in Berkeley. The room feels alive and buzzes with excitement, but you can talk across the table with your partner without shouting or being distracted by your neighbor's conversation. Don't we all want that? Thank you. That's great. And we can make the sonic and visual experience better through high-resolution photographic panels that offer acoustic absorption and beauty. And our precision directional loudspeakers place the sound precisely where it should be and improve the sonic experience at sports stadiums, university lecture halls, and acclaimed musical venues. To sum it up, Meyer Sound is thinking sound. So to close, I'd like to leave you with a short video about a project we recently completed for Denmark's important Jyske Bank. They wanted a new corporate conference room that reimagined how they're going to use this space. They wanted to have everything from formal meetings to company gatherings to choral performances. And we fitted the room with a constellation system, providing them the highly flexible acoustics that they desired.
Okay, so there's Symphony Hall in Boston, there's the Musikverein in Vienna, and then there's the auditorium at Jyske Bank, Silkeborg, Denmark. So maybe it's the ugly duckling of that group, but this little rooftop conference room sounds absolutely world class. That thanks to an acoustic system that can turn this room into a tunnel, or let me whisper in somebody's ear on the other side of the room.
Acoustic and sound is a big part of making this room truly multifunctional. Well, we focus on a lot of things in rooms like this, the right environment, the climate and so on, and we actually thought that it would be nice to put a little bit of extra effort into acoustics this time.
Enter the minds of Meyer Sound. The California-based company has worked for years with music venues, Broadway musicals, even Cirque du Soleil.
So this is the Meyer Sound Constellation System, and we use it for changing the acoustics of rooms.
Their senior scientist is Dr. Roger Schwenke, who, among other things, unravels sound-related mysteries for the Discovery Channel program, Mythbusters.
Here we're doing what we call voice lift, and we can emphasize, say, the presenter. You want to make sure everyone can hear the presenter, but we can also have a mode for question and answer, so that not only can the presenter hear the question, but someone in the back of the room asks a question, people in the front of the room can also hear it. So we can change the acoustical properties for each different use that the room is for.
So I could come into this room without taking a microphone on presentation, and somebody at the back of the room could hear me if I was just speaking in a regular voice.
Sure.
How does that work?
Well, we have 25 microphones in the room.
That's these white guys hanging up here.
Right. And so we can pick up anyone talking anywhere in the room. And we have 64 speakers in the room. So no matter where you're sitting and listening, we can get sound to you. And there have been systems in the past that have a lot of microphones and speakers, but what's new is that now we have enough computational power to individually process from each microphone to each speaker so that it gets there at the right time and the right level to contribute to intelligibility for every listener. So we have to measure between where people talk and the microphones, we have to measure between the speaker and where people listen, and we have to measure the interactions of all of those speakers and all of those microphones.
Well, actually, if people don't notice it's here, it's actually going to be a big success, because then it just proves that it's a multifunctional room where you don't have to think about the technology behind it.
Okay, Steen, so now maybe we finally found an answer to the question, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Roger, take us there.
No problem.
So I think that's the only way they're going to get to Carnegie Hall. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And you brought up a lot of very interesting points. I know that every time, as I listen to opera and music at an apartment building rocking level, and I know when I go into the concert hall, then I have to readjust my ears to the natural, the acoustic that's in that hall.
Right.
With young people hearing music off their earbuds, and is the acoustic we still hear in Carnegie Hall and War Memorial Opera House recognized as the acoustic we want to enjoy music in?
Oh, absolutely. I think these halls have been built that, provide a lush and enveloping environment. The problem with the earbuds is that you isolate yourselves. You're not experiencing something viscerally. It's just strictly sound going directly into your ear. And I think a lot of us have experienced sound that encompasses much more. When the bass of the orchestra is raucous, you feel it. But you don't get that when it just comes in your ear. Yeah, it's absolutely relevant.
Now, you, of course, raised the third rail question of amplification or sound enhancement in the Opera House, suggesting that, a beautiful 19th century hall or a beautiful 20th century hall like the War Memorial Opera House is an enhanced sound. It's not the natural sound of a singer to my ear, but it is supported by the acoustics. Now, enhancement, amplification, how do you walk that fine line that seems to divide opera from the other art forms, in that it's an unamplified art form?
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? I think that we just have to not be afraid to use technology and apply it appropriately. I think that we've all unfortunately experienced a lot of bad sound. There's been a lot of bad sound amplification over the years, and I think adequately applied, delicately done sound can actually enhance the audience.
Opera companies are seeking alternative venues for performances. A lot of those venues are not designed with acoustics in mind. So this is a way, if it's installed in the facility, for people to use alternative venues in some good fashion.
Absolutely, and I think tonight we're having the event at the Can Bar Forum, which was designed much more of a space for, lectures and dialogue between people, but we do have settings that allow it to become the acoustic of an opera hall. So I encourage everyone to hear it for themselves tonight.
Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, thank you.
Our next guest is Ben Nelson, who spent 10 years at Snapfish, seeing the company through from the idea to the world's largest personal publishing service. Right now, he has reinvented the university through the Minerva Project and is here to talk to us about innovation in learning and many other dimensions. Please welcome Ben.
Thank you. And so what we set out to do at Minerva a few years ago is to take an institution that is more than twice as old as the institution of opera and bring it into the 21st century. And to do so, we actually had to go back to the beginning. We had to go back to the principle of why the first university, Bologna, in 1088 was founded. And it was not founded by a group of faculty. It was founded by a group of students. Students who wanted to contract with teachers to teach them how to develop their own intellect, how to improve their standing in the world. Those students actually wound up hiring and firing those professors. They were in complete control. And lo and behold, that didn't seem to be a model that worked out. And instead, the faculty took over. And the faculty-centric universities were born in the Sorbonne, at Oxford, at Cambridge. And the faculty-centric university was the one that evolved. Now, over time, that model had its own problems. The problems in the sense that the university itself, the institution, centered around the faculty. It created the kind of elements that would best serve for lifetime employment, for the furthering of the faculty's career, not necessarily the intellectual development of the students. And so as we were thinking about creating a new university, we thought about how do you create a university with the student at its center, with an institution that focuses on the betterment of the student, not necessarily with the student in charge. And that's effectively what Minerva is. Now, to understand what Minerva is, it's important to also understand what Minerva is not. We are not a university that is made to replicate everything that goes on in a traditional university. We don't have a tenure system. We don't have Division I athletics or any formal collegiate athletics. We don't participate in the amenities race of competing with other universities for who has the nicer statues or climbing walls or lawns. And we don't have a philosophy that the undergraduate should pay to subsidize work that the undergraduate does not benefit from. So what is Minerva? Minerva is first and foremost a university. And to be a university, you have to be accredited. And we are very fortunate to be incubated within the newest member of the Claremont colleges. The Claremont University Consortium is the only grouping of institutions of American higher education that are dedicated to launching new and innovative educational models at the very highest levels of what's available anywhere in the world. And in order to do so, we start with the curriculum. Now, if you ask any elite university president, what do you teach your students? They won't tell you, well, we teach them chemistry and political science and English. They'll tell you that they teach them to be leaders and innovators, that they'll teach them how to think globally. They tell you that they teach them how to think critically and think creatively, how to communicate effectively. But when you ask them, how do you actually do that? They'll pause and they'll say, well, we have chemistry and English and political science, and they pick up that other stuff by accident. We don't think accidental education is the right model either. And so what we've done is we've defined 107 different habits of mind and foundational concepts that we teach all of our students. Their freshman year is comprised of a core curriculum where they really understand not the great books or great works, but the great cognitive tools that they need to apply to any field of study they pursue in the future. We then scaffold those habits of mind foundational concepts throughout the next 3 years. So as they study their major, their concentration, their electives, they get assessed not just on the subject matter that they study, but also how they apply these elements to those various subjects. That means that more than a quarter of our students' grade point average is based on how they think. It also means that at Minerva, lectures are banned, introductory level courses don't exist, entire departments whose purpose is to just disseminate knowledge, we don't participate in because we believe knowledge should be free and ubiquitous. Instead, all of our classes are capped at less than 20 students. They're highly interactive, and students have to be actively learning at all times. We supplement the formal education with an experiential education that we believe is second to none. If we are purporting to teach those individuals who will create or run the major institutions of the world, the last thing we want to do is sequester them away from society for 4 years and then unleash them to run the joint. I don't think it's such a good idea. And so what we do is we bring our students here to San Francisco for their first year, and then we'll break them into cohorts of about 150 students, and they'll live in 6 different cities over the next 6 semesters. And in each one of those cities, not only will they go through the formal curriculum through Minerva, whatever majors or electives they take, but they also get a series of co-curricular experiences where they see the major institutions, foundations, and individuals in those societies and understand how they make the world move forward. Now, in order to enable that curriculum, which is scaffolded, as well as the mobility of the students, we had to create a technology platform that supported it. And what you'll see now is a view into how Minerva will conduct its classes. And I hope it will be informative for you to rethink how great American higher education can be delivered. And so what you'll see first is actually the insides of our residence hall here in San Francisco. And even though all of our students live together, 100% of their courses are done via an online platform that we created. Now, the platform itself is designed to be completely natural in the way that students approach it. They congregate in the middle, take their seats when class begins. They can control what happens on the screen with merely moving their hands. They can raise their hands to ask questions like in a normal class, but they can also type their answers so the professor can pick the wrong but interesting answer. When the professor wants to understand how the students are thinking or where they are, we incorporated dynamic polling, which visually represents where all the students are in their opinions. When they do simulations together, they can see the product of their code as they're creating it and running it. Even when two students are picked to be in debates, the other students rate how they're doing at the bottom, always keeping them actively engaged. We incorporated a number of other technologies, for example, collaborative documents that connect your personal device to the main classroom, as well as working together in groups where the professor can come in and out of the group, give the students some advice, and then bring it back into the classroom itself. And then we record what happens in the classroom so the professors can rate the students, show them how they're doing on their intellectual development programs, and even go back to class and give them pointers on what they said well or didn't say as well. All of this is in the service of actually creating a new kind of educational model. And it allows us to teach students holistically, not just break down a curriculum from course to course, but connect a student from one class to another and make sure that they progress through that development process. Now, when you reimagine a university setting, you wind up attracting quite a bit of attention. We went out looking for a very small group, 15 to 19 students, for a pilot year. And without doing any advertising and no marketing, we received close to 2,500 applications. We have a philosophy at Minerva that we didn't want to stray away from in this founding year, where all qualified students will get accepted. But the criterion to be a Minerva student, just because of the intensity of the experience, is somewhere towards the top quarter or third of the Ivy League. And so even though we got these tremendous applicants, really from very high academic standing, only 2.8% were qualified for admissions. But 48% of those actually decided to matriculate with us. So that means that even though we were twice as selective in our process as a typical class at Harvard, we actually had a higher yield than the majority of other Ivy League institutions. And these group of students really are amazing. When you look at them, they come from all over the world. Even though there are only 30-some, we actually have to double the number of seats in our class, which means that we'll have 2 sections as opposed to 1 going through this pilot year. But they come from 13 different countries. Only 20% are American. 64% are female. And that's what happens when you simply do not discriminate on any basis. You don't give preference to students from one country or another. You certainly don't give preference based on income or wealth. And you have students from not just the United States and Canada, but from Argentina and Brazil, Trinidad and Tobago, China, Vietnam, Malaysia, Nigeria, Israel, Palestine, Sweden, United Kingdom. And they've all coming to San Francisco, not only coming from tremendous backgrounds and great grades, but have done extraordinary things. We have the national debate champion of China. We have somebody who was a 3-time British Columbia champion in rhythmic gymnastics that started a jewelry business when she was 6 years old, born in Hungary, grew up in Canada, and is finishing her 3rd high school degree in India. We've got someone who, I think for pleasure, wrote what is effectively a PhD-level thesis in mathematics at the age of 16. You've got someone who's not only, I think, never gotten anything below an A in his class and is captain of his soccer team and does volunteer work in Central America over the summer, but in order not to be idle, had decided that he was going to hand carve a canoe from a 2-ton white oak over 9 months just to keep himself busy and challenged. These are the kinds of folks that will create the future for all of us. And our desire is to take this group of students, find the highest potential people around the world, not only provide them that education and the experience that we talked about, but actually further their career, help them achieve extraordinary, and therefore have broad impact for the rest of us. Thank you very much.
Ben, thanks so much, and thanks
pleasure.
for being with us. How many students are in this section or the two sections that you're talking about?
So we have 33 students who matriculated. We just had a much higher turnout than we expected.
And where are the professors? Where are the instructors, if not in the classroom?
So for the first year, in these first 4 courses they'll take, 2 of the professors are actually going to be in San Francisco, 2 of them are in Southern California. But the idea is that professors can be anywhere.
And will they ever meet the students?
Oh, yes. In fact, I mean, the students, already many of our students have already met many of our professors. And all of the co-curriculars that occur, many of them are led by professors, all happen in person. But the classroom itself, when you have active learning and you need to assess the students, you actually have to go back and be able to say, here's what you said well, here's what you didn't, here's how you can build on the data that's generated by that, change the way you conduct class by asking the person who really needs to exercise a certain skill more than another student. And you need to basically tool the classroom in order to do that.
How is the arts woven through the learning program?
It's a very important element for us. So of these habits of mind and foundational concept, about a quarter of them are in the humanities. And they are what we call multimodal communications. It's understanding good elements of rhetoric, but also the ability to understand an audience, to cater your message to them, the ability to work together effectively in teams, or to be able to actually deliver a speech or have a conversation one-on-one. All of these are skills and elements that are important to understand on a one-to-one basis. Also, a quarter of our concentrations are in the humanities. And so as students look to have further studies, we look to have more theoretical and practical views of the humanities. So for example, instead of just having an art history course where you learn basically the history of art, but then not much beyond that, our concentration is in the arts and commerce. So you understand both the role of the arts in laying critique to society, but also how you disseminate art. So that if you want to be an artist, or if you want to have a gallery that you run, or an opera company, that you understand both sides of the equation. And it's something as I've talked to many young artists, especially growing up in the opera world, the thing they bemoan the most is that they don't know how to manage their careers.
So if one of your students wanted to take piano lessons, there isn't the music building down the street.
Correct.
They're doing that on their own.
Right. Well, we're going to connect them with some of the good piano teachers in all of these different locations where they
will
can
be sort of networking for the supplemental education.
Exactly.
Absolutely fascinating. We really look forward to watching your progress.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ben. Erica Hall is our final presenter. She is the author of the book Just Enough Research, and in 2001 she co-founded Mule Design Studio in San Francisco, where she is the director of strategy. She speaks and writes frequently about cross-disciplinary collaboration and the importance of natural language in user interface. My favorite part of her bio is in her spare time, she battles empty corporate jargon. I love that. Please welcome Erica Hall.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so fantastic to be here. Welcome to San Francisco. I usually speak at technology conferences, and so you are a much better dressed audience. So it's a real privilege. And yeah, as he said, I'm the co-founder of Mule Design Studio here in San Francisco, and we do a lot of work to solve business and design and communication problems for our clients. And a lot of times when people think about solving these kind of problems, they focus on the specific techniques and the practices and the methodologies. But what I'm here to tell you, and you probably know this from your own experience, The real problem is the people. Much, much less straightforward. And so this is really what we wrestle with in our work. And I'm wrestling with where to aim this thing. Because people are lazy, forgetful creatures of habit. And we love them, and we are them. But what this means, and this is something that I've participated in a lot of research over the years, and this is the one pattern that holds true, maybe not for the Minerva students. I think they break this. And it's completely rational, because if you're a person in this world with so much coming at you, of course you're not going to do any more work than you absolutely have to. Of course, you're going to let the internet remember things for you. And a habit is really just another word for a cognitive shortcut. So while this is sort of a strategy that really works well for each of us as an individual, it's terrible for us in our roles in businesses and organizations, because you have to try to reach these lazy, forgetful creatures of habit. You have to somehow penetrate this fantastic skill of ignoring anything which isn't on the path. And the fundamental question of design or marketing or communication is, how do you get from what is, from what you can observe, from what you can analyze, from what the data tells you, to what ought to be? And in the case of the opera, how do you get people from the sofa to the opera, these lazy, forgetful creatures of habit? Because when you're at your desk and you're working on your work, you're putting together a production, you're putting together a campaign or a website, you have control. You have control. The words go where you want them to go. The pictures and pixels go where you want them to go. But then you send your creation out into this world that you have no control over. You can't make these people pay attention. You can't make them do anything. You don't know when or where they're going to encounter something that you've created. And that's where research comes in. And I talk a lot about research, especially to people in the design and technology community. And there's a lot of resistance towards it because people get really impatient and they just want to start drawing or start coding. And so that's why I wrote the book, to try to make it as easy as possible. Because I want everybody here to consider themselves a researcher. Research is fundamentally, it's just asking questions. It's just asking questions and looking at the answers in a systematic fashion. But even this can be really risky and feel dangerous for people, because once you start asking questions, especially in an organizational context, especially in a traditional organization, what assumptions do you stop questioning? Like, when does it stop? And so for some people, this can feel really threatening. And so I try to distill it and make it as simple as possible so everybody can really feel like, okay, research is something we can get our hands on. It's simply forming questions and then gathering the data through a variety of activities and analyzing the data. So it's a series of techniques that anybody can use to make sure that the decisions that they're making in their work are based in reality and are based in evidence. And so the big question for a lot of businesses is, how do we get those people who aren't already giving us money to give us money? This is, in many cases, the fundamental question. And that is the question of, how do we change that behavior? And so in order to change this behavior, first, we have to understand it. And that's ethnography. You've heard the word ethnography a few times today, and that's really fantastic. Ethnography is a fancy word that simply means doing activities that demonstrate and reveal to us what people actually do, not just what they say they do. And there's some sort of techniques about when you talk to people and you say, oh, you do some sort of ideation, and they'll talk about like what they might want to do. But it really counts as ethnography, and you know you're doing ethnography when it's revealing actual behaviors. And this is important because if you know what people are doing, then you have a pretty good chance of understanding what people will do. Because you can say, okay, what are people doing right now? How are they spending their money? How are they spending their time? And then you can look at those patterns and look at those habits that those lazy, forgetful people have and think, okay, if they're doing this now, how do I make what I want them to do fit into those patterns of behavior? And here's another really important principle. In addition to everybody being lazy, forgetful creatures of habit, everyone lies. And this, I might be painting a pretty dark picture of humanity, but I know I'm talking to people who put on productions where everybody dies tragically at the end for perfectly avoidable reasons. I mean, come on, that's kind of what drives me nuts about an opera. I'm like, oh, come on. There are other fish in the sea. Don't kill yourself for him. Like, that's how I feel when I think about opera. But, so everybody lies because people want others to think highly of them. You know, it's called social desirability bias. You know, we even lie to ourselves. You know, we have this way that we want to think about who we are and what we do, which is not spending, as we've heard, our full-time job, 40 hours a week, watching TV. And so the question is, how do we get those people off that sofa to the opera? And the other thing that's really important about doing ethnographic research is never ask people what they like. You know, we all want to be liked. And you hear, especially with Facebook, we're talking about liking things all the time. If you ask somebody what they like, that doesn't necessarily correlate with any behavior. And we need to change behavior. We don't care if they like the opera if they're not giving us money. I mean, it's great if they talk about it, that's great. We want people to talk about it and you know, think about it. But we want people to go to the opera, really make it a part of their lives. But never ask people what they like. You know, I like horses. I really, they're beautiful. I will never buy a horse online. As much as I like them. You know, Amazon could offer Equus Prime tomorrow. I wouldn't be a buyer. I've done a room. I live in San Francisco, $9,000 a month apartments. And don't ask people what they hate either. Plenty of people do and buy things they say they hate. It's weird. People are weird. And never ask people to predict. Like, if you show somebody something and say, do you think you'd do this? Do you think you'd buy this? People might say, oh, yeah, sure, because they're just sort of projecting forward based on that social desirability bias, based on that desire to be liked or to think like, yeah, you know, Schindler's List is the only movie I watch on Netflix. So if you ask somebody a question in a survey, and a lot of times you'll see questions like this in a lot of surveys, like how likely are you to purchase a computer in the next 12 months? How likely are you to attend the opera? Somebody might say, oh, I'm very likely to attend the opera in the next year. Because the question that they've heard is really, how concerned are you about looking smart and looking cultured? And the answer is very. You know, we heard about sharing, and that's a very good principle. Like, people will share things like, look how I'm so smart. I'm so smart. But really, this is survey says. Survey says. And so a lot of bad research happens because people ask the questions that are the most satisfying to ask, or that they hope they can get an answer from, that aren't necessarily the most effective, because the questions you need to ask aren't going to be the ones. Like, it would be great if you could get an honest prediction from somebody, but you won't. And then, special comment about focus groups. No good, no good. Nobody actually lives in one of these rooms. It's a moderated performance, but it feels like research, and it's research theater. And so a lot of people are like, oh, we'll do a focus group. But it's not ethnography, because no actual behavior happens in a place like this. And a lot of times you get a question like, how is market research and user research different? And one good way to think about it is that market research looks at previous behavior, you know, what people have purchased and trends around purchasing habits and attendance habits and things like that. But user research allows you to look forward, because you can look at what people actually do and think, well, how can that translate into what we want them to do? Because you want to change your perspective from thinking about the organization, your organization, to thinking about your organization in the wider world context. because people are going to be encountering you in this context amidst all of this other competition for this attention. And again, lazy, forgetful creatures of habit, if you take away one thing. And so the best question you can ask is ask people how they spend their time. Because the answers that you get to that will provide you with stories that then you can use to figure out how the opera and thinking about the opera and the music and everything that you know is so fantastic fits into their lives. And this is how you create meaning. Because you can think, oh, what's important to people is spending time with their kids, is having a transcendental experience, is just getting out of the house. And you can think, well, how does the meaning that we ascribe to the opera, how does that have meaning for them? And you can make that connection, and that's the power of research. And the last point I'll make is to remember that all of us, we are people, your colleagues are all people. So sometimes in order to really make research work within your organization, you have to start by doing some of that ethnography on the people around you. Because like I said, asking questions can be very threatening. And research is only effective if it's done collaboratively as part of a team, with everybody agreeing that the outcomes of the research are valid. And so to get past that threat, you'll have to look at people, you'll have to talk to people around you and start developing a lot of empathy for them. I love these guys. I know, staring at their cold eyes. Because even though people are the problem, people are also the answer, because we need the people out there. We need all of those people who are on all of those sofas out there in America to learn to understand and appreciate and know and feel that the opera is something special and familiar and not difficult, something that's easy, something that's approachable, something that they can build a habit around. Thank you. There. And.
Erica, thank you so much. And I just saw a lot of audience surveys being ripped up because it happens so often with opera companies. You know, how likely would you be to buy a 5 opera series as opposed to a 3 opera series? Everyone says we're likely to buy a 5 opera series, and then they get the bigger bill in the mail, and no one comes, and the company goes bankrupt. Or what are the operas you really want to see? And you know, there's a list of 10, and you know, everyone wants Der Ferne Klange, and then no one buys tickets for it. And that we suffer from a series of expressions of likelihood that just don't pan out. For small organizations that don't have a research department, how do small companies begin to do good research?
Well, that's a fantastic question, because I can start to answer that with buy my book.
Yeah,
it's a very short book.
absolutely.
Now, because, and that's a great point, because we get this all the time from individuals or small organizations, and they think, well, I don't have the resources to do research. But the best resource to do research is in your mind. It's developing critical thinking. And really, there's so many resources out there, and it doesn't take much. It takes even just calling some people up and saying, tell me about how do you make decisions about how you spend your time, how you spend your money. And even that one question I put up there, which is really just like what do you do? And if you ask people, if you just get on the phone one-on-one, where people are less likely to feel like they're putting on a performance, because that really, the truth value just goes into the ground, the more people think like, oh, I'm a show. But if you just say like, hey, whatever you do is really interesting, and get on the phone and just tell me about how you make decisions, and say, and why do you do that, and why do you do that, and why do you do this on a Saturday night? You know, what do you do for a special occasion? Oh, why do you do that? Why is that important to you? And just talk about people's reality. You know, it doesn't take much. You know, offer them $25 at Amazon. People will give you all the time you need. But I encourage everybody to do it.
And it begins with thinking about the way you behave, thinking about the way others behave, and just chatting with them about it.
Yeah.
Because it is remarkable. And someone once said to me that on a survey, everyone does lie. They are more well-educated, they are richer, and they are younger than they ever indicate. So it's just the truth the way it is. Well, thank you so much for just opening our eyes. And I know we're all going to buy the book. Thank you. Now, there are a couple of more steps. There are a couple of more steps in our afternoon here. But first, I would like you to join together and thank all 6 of our guest speakers for their really insightful presentations. It was fantastic. Thank you so much. Again, we have another couple of steps, but I wanted to remind people that it is possible to go to the Exploratorium this evening after the New Works showcase. There will be buses, and if you would like a ticket for that, you can get them from Opera America staff at the registration desk, and they have tickets for the Exploratorium. And our guest speakers will be available to chat with you in a few minutes after our next segment. But I also wanted to remind people that just through the doors on this side, we do have some demonstrations from 4 o'clock on, so you can see, and they're listed in your supplement, you can see Google Glass, you can see the Extreme Sightlines, the Oculus apparatus from Fisher Dax, a number of wonderful technologies that are changing the user experience in the room immediately to my left. In the meantime, there is a sheet of paper in front of each of you. And what I'd like you to do is to just literally take 2 minutes to write down the most present idea that struck you in the course of the last almost 2 hours. What insight, what idea, light bulb went off? It may be completely directly related to something that James or Erica said, whomever said. It may be an independent idea that was just stimulated by the material and it came to you. If there is a takeaway for you from these 2 hours, what is it? Write that down in your best penmanship, please.